Up to now, you have been undertaught and undervalued. That's what a professor at an elite university told me years ago as we wrapped up a course of study. I'm not really sure what he meant, at least at that time, but with the benefit of a couple of decades, I have a little bit more insight into how that might apply to me as well as perhaps to you. One day when I was returning from lunch, the boss summoned me to his office, leaned over his desk and said, "You are an oddball." That probably shouldn't have mattered very much, quite honestly, but it did. It hurt. And as I thought about that while that idea was reverberating throughout my mind the rest of the day, I became more upset. When I arrived home after work, my wife Andrea said, "Well, how was your day?" So I rehearsed what happened. She listened, and then she said, "Maybe you should see a counselor." Yeah. Soon, I was visiting with the psychologist. As they finished their assessment, they said, "Layne, you have ASD. All-star doctorate? Sweet!" No, that's just a diagnosis for autistic spectrum disorder. What? That doesn't even sound right. After all, I've had world-class mentors. I've held responsible positions in business and government. I have HR credentials. I've started businesses. I've been a presidential appointee and more. How can that be? The psychologist said, "Well, some people who get this diagnosis really resist it and deny it. Others are more accepting of it." Even though that was a shock to my system, as I let that diagnosis land, it was as if a light bulb, no, maybe more like a rocket going off, because suddenly there was new insight everywhere. I understood like never before why I found myself from time to time in impossible situations, as well as what some of the key factors were for creating those wonderful mountaintop moments that benefited me and others around me. So with that new insight, I decided, or perhaps more accurately was compelled, to leave my old life behind. I cannot cling to that in any way. And instead, I am moving forward with a new perspective on people and organizations and their possibilities. And that is the basis for my idea worth spreading tonight that I wish to share with you. It is this: autism at work works best, and I will show you why. The term neurodiversity is often associated, though not exclusively, with autism. But to be neurodiverse means to think differently or to process sensory information through a different channel and pathway in the brain. It can also mean to do the same things in a different manner. Autism is the fastest growing developmental disability in America, and no matter what the reported diagnosis rate is, the actual rate is much higher because there are many people in every occupation up and down the food chain who are autistic, and they are completely unaware, just as I was, who for over 20 years was making a successful contribution in business, all the while not knowing that I was autistic. I'm also reminded of some colleagues that I've had over the years who are autistic as well. For example, Matt, he ran a $30 million business. He reported to me. He was always decisive. He was objective. He was always self-accountable. If something didn't go right, he never tried to blame someone else. No, he was always there to be responsible, whether it was his fault or not. What an admirable trait. Or Frank, our sometimes irascible IT leader, who seemed to be the only person who could actually get the system to function as it should. All of his projects were on time and on budget. I call that nirvana, by the way. And as capable as both of those people were, each of them also had some drawbacks, some limitations in certain of their work relationships. Now, I'm not saying hire the handicapped, as noble as that is. No, I'm saying hire the best person, but be open-minded to the idea that that person could be a neurodiverse individual. Neurodiversity is healthy in organizations. To give you a sense of what it's like to be autistic in the workplace, I'll share this incident with you, and perhaps the same thing has happened to you. One day, the CEO asks me and another guy to come up with an idea that would benefit the company. He wanted us to report in a week. The other guy came up with this idea. Let's begin playing new employee orientation bingo. That way our employees can have an incentive to get around and meet folks that they don't even know. I'm not sure how long it took him to come up with this idea, maybe 10 or 15 minutes, maybe longer, I don't really know. My idea was to improve our financial position by realigning some business units. I estimated that if we did so, we could improve our results by 5%. Because I wanted my work to be excellent and actionable, I documented it in a 3-page memo. When we came back to report to the CEO, he decided to go with, that's right, he went with bingo. I felt undervalued that day. I thought maybe I over-delivered on the wrong thing. But I would ask you, is it possible that maybe I was also undertaught? You know that day my boss called me an oddball? He did me a favor because I founded a company that provides neurodiverse business strategies to organizations. The power in neurodiversity is maximized when the talent management function is revitalized, when managers understand how to work with neurodiverse populations, as well as with people with autism, get some coaching so that their interpersonal bandwidth can grow over time and be more successful and effective. Had we been dialed into neurodiversity that day when that assignment was given, I'm quite sure we would have had a different outcome. To begin with, the CEO would have made sure that he was aware of how important it is to be very specific as to what your expectations are, whether they're economic, operational, reputational, social, all of them, none of them, something else. That really would have helped. Similarly, all of us would have been aware of how important it is to hear all of the voices in the organization. And all means all, especially when some of those voices come from people who don't really say much. Neurodiversity is also productive. I know a man with autism who was hired to fill a position that required 3 to 5 years of experience. He had no experience, no training, nobody on the inside pulling for him, but he was hired by this international organization. They trained him to be a lab tech. He'll go to work at 6 in the morning, will often work 12-hour days. He's earned the respect and the goodwill of his boss and his coworkers because he's very productive. He's also very precise. That man is with us tonight. He is TJ, my son. As proud as I am of him, he is not alone. Chase Bank reports that their autistic employees are 40% or more productive than a comparable non-autistic employee group. Neurodiversity is productive. However, it's really important to understand that only approximately 20% of Americans who have autism can actually hold a competitive job. And many of them are never hired, despite being well qualified. Why is that? I'll let you in on a secret. Companies select based on fit. And fit is a cover word for bias. Microsoft is changing that. They've sought out autistic candidates. They've changed their interview process. They've given them more time to showcase their abilities. And clearly, Microsoft is an organization that is interested in hiring substance over fit. In addition to being productive, neurodiversity is innovative. I know a man who had a PhD in science. He worked in several high-tech facilities, some of which had national security implications. One of those was at the nuclear facility nearby. This man was well published. He had several patents to his name, and yet, if he was bored in a business meeting, he would simply stand up and walk out. Now, be honest, how many of you would like to do that, right? Of course. But you don't, because it's rude. His employer decided that the value of his innovative contribution far outweighed the social gaffes he might make from time to time. He also was not alone. There are several reports indicating that people with autism can have IQs of 130 or more. Highly capable. So question, if neurodiversity is healthy, is productive, and is innovative, what is it that keeps decision makers from harvesting the economic benefits of neurodiversity? I believe the answer is found in Greek mythology, believe it or not. Procrustes was a character who owned a hotel, whose claim to fame was that he had an iron bed that would magically fit the size of any traveler. If an unsuspecting traveler decided to stay with Procrustes as they got into bed, if they were too short, not a problem. Procrustes would simply stretch them. If they were too tall, he would lop off feet and heads. That is an absurd business strategy. Procrustes is alive and well today. Companies create value by doing something different than their competitors do. That is the essence of business strategy, according to Michael Porter, a leading authority on business strategy. Neurodiverse employees are among the best qualified to accentuate the right differences, increase value, and gain a competitive advantage. Neurodiversity is a competitive advantage, period. Finally, what is your personal contribution to neurodiversity? Whatever it is, whether it's ASD, ADHD, or something else, never undervalue it or dismiss it, because without you, we are all less diverse and less successful. Thank you.